Some things have an explanation. A creaky floorboard, a flickering shadow, a brain wired to make sense of the dark. But every so often, something happens that refuses to be explained. A face in a window that shouldn't exist. A shape standing too still, watching. A feeling that tightens in your chest, telling you that you're not as alone as you thought. These aren't just stories. They happened to people who still struggle to make sense of what they saw. Some encounters were brief, others left marks that never faded. All of them have one thing in common: they defy logic. Let's dive into 15 unbelievable encounters with monsters that will keep you up at night, starting with number 15, the winged demon of the cliff. A man hiking alone reached the edge of a cliff, enjoying the view as the wind howled around him. But beneath the rush of air, something else gnawed at him, an instinct, raw and unshakable. He pulled out his camera and scanned the rocks below. At first, it looked like a trick of the light, a shadow stretching across the cliffside. But when he zoomed in, his breath caught. A creature perched on the jagged stone, its massive wings folded tightly, its limbs unnaturally thin. It looked human, but wrong. The arms stretched too far, the angles sharp and unnatural. Then it moved, not flying, not walking. Something else. A shift that sent pressure through the air, making his chest tighten. His body screamed at him to run. And he did. But even after he left, one question haunted him. What if it followed? Number 14. The unknown figure in the incinerator basement. The Lillo incinerator in Kentucky is infamous. In 1966, a woman was found murdered inside, and since then, stories have swirled about something lurking there. When YouTuber KLW Herc decided to investigate, he expected urban legends, not something real. As he stepped inside, an eerie silence wrapped around him. The deeper he walked, the more it felt like the walls were holding their breath. Then, scraping. Soft at first, then deliberate. In the basement, his flashlight flickered, and that's when he saw it. At first, he thought it was a shadow painted on the wall, but then it moved. He ran, sprinting up the stairs, his breath ragged. He expected it to follow. It didn't, because it didn't need to. It had seen him, and somehow he knew it was waiting. Next time, it might not just watch. Number 13, the rooftop watcher. She only looked up because of the sound, a faint scraping above her apartment window. Maybe a cat, maybe a bird. But when her eyes landed on the rooftop, her blood turned cold. It was perched there, watching. Its limbs were thin, wiry, barely covered in sparse feathers. Its body skeletal, its eyes huge, glossy, unblinking. It didn't move. Neither did she. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears, but the thing only crouched there, locked onto her, like it was waiting. Then, in a blink, it was gone. No sound, no movement, just gone. Neighbors checked the rooftop. Nothing. No footprints, no feathers, no proof. Just a lingering, suffocating fear that hadn't been there before. She doesn't look up anymore, because somewhere, in the shadows, she knows those eyes are still watching. Number 12, the balcony visitor. Late one night in Mexico City, a man stepped onto his balcony for fresh air, the city lights flickering below. It was quiet, normal, but then his stomach dropped. He wasn't alone. Just a few feet away, something stood in the dim glow, wrapped in tattered cloth, swaying slightly. He thought it was a person, until he saw its face, or what should have been a face. The skin was stretched, warped, hollow-eyed, like something had tried to make a human shape and failed. A sickening wave of dread crashed over him. He wanted to move. He couldn't. It only stood there, watching. And then, gone. No movement, no sound, just empty space. Locals say spirits linger between worlds, waiting for something. He doesn't know what he saw, but he knows this. Some things don't just watch, they wait. Number 11. The shadowy lurker. A man sat in his dimly lit living room scrolling through his phone. The night was quiet until he felt it. A creeping chill, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. His breath stilled. Slowly, he turned toward the window, and there, just beyond the glass, something stood. Too tall, too thin, limbs stretched unnaturally long. The streetlight barely illuminated its form, but its eyes burned. His gut told him to look away, pretend he hadn't seen it. But then, it tilted its head. His hands shook as he lifted his phone. He had to capture it. But the moment he hit the record, it moved. Not stepping back, not walking away, just fading, dissolving into the darkness as if it had never been there. His footage was blurry. People dismissed it, but he knows what he saw, and some nights, he still feels it, waiting outside. Number 10. The hidden crawler in a camping photo. It was just an old camping photo, a memory frozen in time, until he saw it. Reddit user Luminosity was casually scrolling through pictures from a trip he had taken years ago. The image seemed normal at first, just a group of friends sitting around a campfire, laughing, unaware of anything unusual. But when he brightened the image, his stomach dropped. There, crouched in the darkness just beyond the fire's reach, was something. It had elongated limbs, sickly pale skin, and a face that looked almost human, but wasn't. And the worst part? It was crawling toward them. None of them had seen or heard a thing that night. No footsteps, no rustling in the bushes, no sign that anything had been watching them. And yet, there it was. People in the comments immediately connected it to crawlers, unnatural humanoid creatures with jerky, inhuman movements, often spotted near campsites. Could it have been a trick of the light? Maybe. But once you see something like that, you can't unsee it. It's just pretty scary. Number 9. The roadside encounter. A quiet night ride turned into something out of a nightmare. A man was cycling down a lonely rural road, the cool night air filling his lungs. It was peaceful, until his headlight flickered over something moving fast across the pavement. His heart pounded as he braked hard, expecting a deer, maybe a stray dog. But it wasn't. A pale, bone-thin creature darted across the road, its contorted body crawling on all fours. But wrong. Its limbs were too long, joints bending in ways that shouldn't be possible. It moved like a spider, its skin stretched tight over its frame. Just before it vanished into the brush, its head snapped toward him. He couldn't see its face, but he felt it watching. He held his breath, listening. No rustling, no footsteps, just silence. Whatever it was, it saw him. And maybe it wasn't alone. Number 8. The cave humanoid. Exploring a cave at night was probably his first mistake. Armed with a flashlight and misplaced confidence, he stepped deeper into the tunnel. The air was damp, thick, pressing against his skin. The only sound was the steady drip of water until something else joined it. It wasn't an echo. It was breathing. His flashlight flickered, shadows twisting against the jagged walls. And then, he saw it. A pale, emaciated figure crouched in the darkness, ribs pushing against sickly skin, black sunken eyes locked onto him. It didn't blink. It didn't move. It just watched. Then it lunged. A grotesque jerking movement, its mouth gaping impossibly wide. The explorer staggered backward, light shaking, breath ragged. A wet guttural growl echoed as bony fingers twitched. He ran. Behind him, something skittered in the dark. He made it out, but not alone. Number 7. The Veiled Watcher. Security cameras catch a lot of strange things. This wasn't supposed to be one of them. At exactly 3 a.m., a motion sensor triggered a feed monitoring an empty street. The camera recorded something moving, a figure draped in white, gliding, not walking down the pavement. Its face was hidden in shadow, but its body moved wrong, almost like it was being pulled by invisible strings. Then it stopped. Slowly, it turned toward the camera. No eyes, no features, just a black void where a face should be. A skeletal hand lifted, long, twisted fingers curling in a way that sent an undeniable wave of dread through the viewer. The screen flickered, static. When the feed returned, gone. No sign it had ever been there. Some say it was a lost spirit. Others believe it was something worse. But one question lingers. If it didn't want to be seen, why did it stop to look? Number 6. The Skinwalker Transformation. In a quiet Punjab neighborhood, a group of kids played in the alley, their laughter filling the warm night air. Then one of them froze. A boy, no older than 10, suddenly convulsed. His body twisted, snapped, changed. His arms shrank. His face stretched. His bones cracked into something else. In seconds, he was gone. In his place, a dog, panting, watching. The other children screamed, stumbling backward, terror choking their voices. What they had seen wasn't a trick, wasn't imagination. The boy had changed. The footage spread online like wildfire. Some called it a hoax. Others said it was proof. Those who know the old stories whispered something else. Skinwalkers don't reveal themselves unless they're hungry. And that dog? It wasn't just watching, it was waiting. Number 5. The Unseen Presence in an Abandoned Farmhouse. YouTuber. The Flex Tapes thought he was just exploring another abandoned farmhouse. He wasn't alone. The place was old, rotting, its silence unnerving. He set up his camera and tried to settle in. Then, the sound of footsteps, slow, heavy, climbing the stairs, coming straight toward him. His breath caught. Before he could react, his camera caught something. A figure stood in the doorway. No sound, no breath, just pure darkness shaped like a man. He bolted, adrenaline surging as he stumbled outside. The next day, he checked the footage. The figure wasn't there. But the footsteps, the overwhelming, suffocating sense of being watched, very real. Some places have histories better left undisturbed, and some things never really leave. Number 4. The Watcher in Blackbird Forest. Legends are easy to dismiss until you catch one staring back at you. Reddit user ColdGate11 had always heard the eerie rumors about Delaware's Blackbird Forest, a place with a reputation for shadowy figures lurking just beyond the tree line. But it was all just talk, right? That's what he thought until his camera caught something he never saw with his own eyes. He was casually recording his campsite, panning across the dimly lit clearing, when something shifted behind a wooden box. A figure, barely visible in the darkness, stood just out of reach of the fire's glow. Its eyes gleamed unnaturally, locked onto him. The moment his camera flicked back in its direction, it moved. Fast. Too fast. The way it ducked out of sight wasn't human. It wasn't startled. It was intentional, like it had been caught and knew it. ColdGate11's heart pounded as he scanned the area, but when he went to check, nothing was there. No footprints or any kind of rustling in the brush. Number 3. The Silent Stalker on a Live Cam. Watching a live feed of an empty forest at 3 a.m. seems harmless, until something watches back. Reddit user Insect8448 had been scrolling through remote live cams for fun, killing time in the dead of night. The feed was quiet, just trees swaying in the wind, the occasional flicker of a passing animal. But then, something shifted. At first, it was just a shadow in the background, something almost imperceptible. Then it stepped forward, and it wasn't an animal. It wasn't even close. The figure moved all wrong. Its limbs jerked unnaturally, like it was being controlled by something unseen. And then it just stopped, completely still. staring. At the camera. At him. It didn't turn away. It didn't slowly step back into the trees. It was just there 1 second and then gone. Not glitched out, not distorted. Gone. The internet exploded with theories. Cryptid, glitch in the stream. But one comment stood out from the rest, something that sent chills through everyone who read it. It wasn't glitching. It was adjusting. It knew it was being watched. And if it knew it was being watched, that means it knew exactly who was watching. Number 2. The red-eyed creature in the woods. A solo camper, a dark, rainy night, and something staring from the trees. Reddit user Zombie Paranormal was documenting his trip when his camera picked up something he never saw at the moment. 2 glowing red eyes. They weren't reflecting light like an animal's. They weren't blinking. They were burning, locked onto him from deep within the tree line, unmoving, unwavering. And then, they disappeared. A pit formed in his stomach as he grabbed his flashlight and stepped outside. He swept the beam across the trees, searching for any sign of movement. But there was nothing. No rustling, no sounds. Not even the wind dared to move. The silence was thick, unnatural, like the whole forest was holding its breath. When he uploaded the footage, theories exploded. A Wendigo? A demon? A lost soul? But one comment stopped him cold. If you ever see red eyes in the dark, it's already too late. That was enough. He packed up and left that night, never looking back. Because some things, they aren't meant to be seen. Number 1. The man in the woods. Some nightmares don't have fangs or glowing eyes. Some just stand there and watch. YouTuber Sky from Swamp Valley had set out for a peaceful night alone in the woods, hoping for nothing more than a quiet evening under the stars. What he got was a full-blown horror movie. It started as a feeling, that nagging, unshakable sensation of being watched. Then came the movement in the trees. And then, a man, just standing there, staring, not moving, not saying a word. Sky tried to convince himself it was nothing, but his gut told him otherwise. He whispered into the camera, "I don't want to sound paranoid, but this is freaking me out." He picked up his pace, hoping to put some distance between himself and the silent figure. But then, the man started following him. And then, full nightmare mode. The figure reappeared, this time holding a gas can and a lit torch. Sky didn't wait to find out what came next. His camera captured frantic flashes of firelight as he ran for his life. He barely made it out, but the question still lingers in the back of his mind. Who was that? If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon in the next one.